Welcome to A State of Mind. My name is Paul John Dykes, and today we are going to be talking about St Roch's with Andy Cameron and Stevie Mullen. I'm joined myself by Jim Simonetti. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks again, Paul.
It's an absolute pleasure. This is a St Roch State of Mind today, so we're looking forward to some tales of St Roch's history and their present, and of course their future as well. But Andy, we spoke to you this morning on the Axom Bulletin, and we want to hear a wee bit more about your tale, your journey. Take us back to a young kid in Kilwinning.
Aye. Firstly, I would say I'm a fan of the show. I've been listening recently, and when Steve had said to me and yourself about coming on and getting interviewed, I thought to myself, having listened to the guests and their stories is really, really interesting. So just if you've got any listeners, just to hope I can tell a story that's interesting. For me, it's great to be associated with a show here that gives you an opportunity to talk about Celtic and what Celtic mean to you and your personal journey with it. You mentioned Conan. When I was younger, it just shows you, I suppose, how society as such may well have changed, as well as a number of other things. But we moved into a place called Pennyburn in Conan when I was probably about primary 2. Stayed there, I was at primary 6, and that would have been up to about 1979, since 1980. And the vivid memory I've got is that I didn't know about sectarianism or any of that stuff at that very young age, obviously. But a Dawson Celtic supporters bus, the Sons of Garryowen it was called, used to come through to Pennyburn and pick me up. I remember I had the big long Celtic scarf, and I was only a 10-year-old boy. So in terms of cultural changes, can you imagine? I've got a 10-year-old boy. I couldn't imagine for a second me putting my boy onto a bus to go to Celtic Park. It's half an hour, 45 minutes drive up the road. But I always remember when I owned the bus, I was sort of treated with a wee bit of sort of hero status with all the guys, because I was the wee guy for Cowan and Pennyburn who was getting picked up with a Celtic bus. The connotations of what Cowan was at that particular time didn't mean anything to me. So I used to travel up to the bus. In my mind, in my memories, I was on the bus myself, and I'd go to Celtic Park myself, meet my granda and my mates. But obviously there was adults on the bus who were watching out for me. If any of them are listening now, thanks, because I've never had the opportunity to thank you. So the binding memory though was going back for the games. When I was walking through, the bus used to drop me off and walking through Pennyburn, I used to get sort of abuse off people that are maybe 16, 17 year olds. I was only maybe 10-year-old, and I used to get abuse and called names, and I always wondered why they put me on just as a football supporter, until you realise later on about the bigotry and all that sort of stuff that was quite apparent to me when I was younger. So I think I was the only Tim in the village, and I think I could hold that to scrutiny.
See, when you think back, Stevie, to sectarianism and being exposed to that at such a young age as well, is that something that you experienced yourself?
Mostly when I was going to try and get a job, gain some employment. Remember getting took by a guy called Joe Woods to a joiner's company. Obviously my mum and dad made sure it was spick and span, suit, shirt and tie, everything. Went in and get the interview, and I come back out, Mr. Woods says, how'd you gone? Done really well. They asked you what school you at, and I went, of course. They went, we're not getting a job. And as simple as that, you weren't gaining any employment.
Jim, I mean, obviously even with the changing of times, you would hope that isn't as prevalent, but again, you've got experience of this when you were growing up as well.
Aye, we all experienced it. Everybody experienced it with me. I mean, as soon as I looked out there, my full name, James Anthony Pellegrino Simonetti. I mean, there was absolutely no chance. That's actually true. And you look at it and you see, actually, where I grew up, there wasn't much bigotry and whatever, because I grew up in a massive Celtic area. But again, it's the same as Stevie. When you left school, you were going to apply for jobs and whatever, where you came from, what school you went to, was a very, very strong negative against you. But I'm glad to say that we overcame all that, and we've actually progressed and been stronger in life because of our faith and because of our upbringing.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right there, and we've spoken about how important it was for the legions of people who suffered that kind of oppression when Celtic became the champions of Europe, because they were a shining beacon for everybody to be proud of, and obviously they did it in a way that was all-inclusive. They've always been all-inclusive and still are to this day. When you look back, Andy, at your early memories of going to watch Celtic, what kind of players stick in your mind?
My memories of I said in Conan, so I think it was around, must have been 1980. I remember we played Real Madrid. It was a away from home tie, and I actually had the Real Madrid pennant at the time, and I had the Real Madrid players on it. So I sort of had a soft spot for Real Madrid when I was a kid. I remember that game, but the games I remember, my first Old Firm game, believe it or not, it was I think it was 1979-80. We won 1-0, and Roddy McDonald, or was it? Roddy McDonald, I think, scored the winner. I was at that game, and I remember where we used to stand. Do you remember the wee woman that's got the teddy bear that stood around the Celtic end? I stood no far from her, and we used to travel up in that bus. I used to meet my mates, because I stayed in Garngad before I went to Conan. And I met my mates for the Garngad, who were my pals when I was 5-year-old, and then my grand and my uncles and stuff like that were there. So my early memories, but first Old Firm game was that game. My first game that I remember, a final, was actually the Junior Cup. My granddad took me to the Junior Cup final, and it shows you how your memory is tainted, and you think you remember something until you check the facts. When I went to that game, it was Benburb against Baillieston in the Junior Cup final at Hampden. It was mobbed, right? 1980. I always maintained until just the other day when I checked it that the score was nothing each. I said this to Shuey Farrell just a couple of weeks ago, and says, Shuey said it was 2-0 in that game. But what must have happened was my granddad told me that Baillieston won the replay 2-0. But my granddad must have been busting to get to the pub in 90 minutes. Told me the game finished at 0-0, and then later on told me Baillieston won the replay at 2-0. So that was my first sort of cup final. First game was the Rangers. Well, first Old Firm game was certainly the Rangers game. I would have been at other games in these seasons, but I don't remember them. My first memory of Celtic was Andy Lynch scoring the cup final in 1977. Scored a penalty. So around about at that time, I suppose you don't choose to be a Celtic fan, aren't you? For me, the relationship with Celtic is sort of like, and this is the first time I've ever said this, it's like having that big brother that you never had. So you're born into it, and you look up to them when you're younger, and you want to emulate them when you're younger. And over the years, there's ups and downs, and sometimes they have relationships with people that you're not really happy about, and you sort of fall out with them, but you always love them and always go back to them, and you won't hear anybody else bad mouthing them. So Celtic is a big, big part of our lives, and it's good to start thinking back in the memories.
I always remember an interview that Jim Kerr done, and he said that as you grow older, you can change just about anything in your life, including your religion, your political party, even your name. Yep. But you would never change your football team. And I know there's a few exceptions to that, Pat and Evan being one of them, but you just couldn't do it, could you?
Right. And interestingly, we were speaking to Stevie on the way through here, and we were talking about your heroes when you were younger. Maurice Johnston was my football hero. In 1986, remember, I'm 16. Graham Mitchell, who played for Hibs, still played for Hibs at the time, actually, didn't he? So Graham Mitchell and Maurice Johnston are good pals. Maurice Johnston goes to the Rock Secondary School. He stops in his white Porsche outside, the closest right next to my granny's, and when he got out, he was a walking idol to me. I was 16-year-old. So you can imagine when that happened, how much a negative impact that had. So you can't change your football team, you would have thought.
the thing with Maurice Johnston, his name keeps popping up, as it will. He's part of the history of the club, and there's nothing we can do about it. When you look at him, he had that idol appeal. He was iconic, he grew the hair, long sleeves, shirt outside his shorts. Take us back to finding out what you had done, though, Andy. I mean, what was your lasting memory of that? Was it just one of absolute betrayal?
In 1989, well, at that particular time, I worked in the cleansing department when I left school. The reason for that was that I used to look out the window and see the guys playing football at lunchtime. And when I was younger, we were all younger, you played football every single day. So for me to get an opportunity to go into a job but play football at lunchtime, I worked in the cleaning, and my first year I was picking up litter. The next couple of years I was sweeping the streets up in Blackhill and Proven Mill. That was my beat. I absolutely loved it, but I remember it vividly this day. I was in the cleaning and we're going down, and somebody says Maurice Johnston signed for Rangers, and my instant, I suppose most Celtics fans' instant reaction was, is he heck? Anybody who knows me knows I wouldn't usually use that language, but it was just absolutely no way in my mind that it could have happened. And when it happened, it was a wee bit shell shock. And for me at 19, there's I suppose a wee bit of intrigue. You're going, what's happening at Rangers? How can Graham Souness have that sort of pull? When you're going, is this at that time, you don't understand the significance of it. And I think Stevie said before, and I agree with him, that set Celtic back for probably 10, maybe longer than that, because it had such a big... I remember us singing, I might be wrong here, the 89 final, Joe Miller scored. Again, I was at that game, Chock-a-Block, and I remember singing before the game, F your alley, we've got Mo. And I think that gave the players a lift to go on, and it gave the crowd a lift, because there was rumoured or announced just prior to that cup final that he was signing for us, and then he went out and done what he done. So it was a stab in the heart.
Stevie, we have spoken about it previously, and you quite rightly said that it gave them the upper hand. And it's something we never actually got back until Martin O'Neill came back into into the fray, you know, and became the manager of Celtic. When you think about betrayals in Celtic's history, you look at him, you look at Brendan Rodgers. Would you say Brendan Rodgers was up there? The other day there, we were talking about Bolingoli. I mean, are these things that you can say, well, you know, history will tell us that Maurice Johnston's was the worst? I mean, how do you
I would
gauge that?
forgive Martin O'Neill, and I'm sorry, Brendan Rodgers, and I'd forgive Bolingoli. I don't think I could ever forgive Maurice Johnston. I worked in HarperCollins at that time. But funnily enough, about 3 weeks after he had been paraded with a scarf, a big guy called Chow, who is now the manager of the Chase pub, who was very friendly, he says, just hold your horses, he's a wee bit premature. What are you talking about? He's been on the park. And he went, I'm telling you, just be watch. He was friendly with McMurdo. And I was on night shift in HarperCollins the night when it came through in the press. There was no social media at that time that he'd signed. And HarperCollins was predominantly Rangers fans. But I don't know who was more disappointed. I was in tears, but they thought their club had died. And some of them ripped up their season tickets. Some of them took wreaths to Ibrox. So although we were devastated, I think they actually lost quite a lot of fans through that gesture, signing Maurice Johnston.
We spoke earlier about sectarianism and how you've suffered that or been exposed to it in your younger days. I mean, that again really did show that it existed, and it was rife in 1989. I remember the burning of scarves outside Ibrox Stadium. Jim, what was your memory of that tumultuous time in our history?
Actually, I remember the day very well. I flew up from London and came off the plane. I'd been doing a business meeting at that particular time and flew up, came out the airport, and all the press were everywhere. And I go, I wonder what's happened. And then I get picked up in the car. Maurice Johnston's signing, he signed for Rangers. And I went, really? I think they were either waiting on him, or other people coming to go to Ibrox that same day. But it was a sad day that he went across, and I couldn't believe it personally that somebody could do that. And I suppose we were all younger back then, and we couldn't really understand that he was shown by Celtic, and then the next thing, wow, in the space of a heartbeat, he's out at Ibrox. But now that we're older, we've learnt for that as well. Don't parade anybody. Don't, as Stevie said, the guy that he was speaking to, don't parade anything, don't announce anything until you know the deal's done and it's all done in black and white. But it was a sad time, and I actually remember the first time, the first game that he came to Celtic Park, there was a deafening silence. Do you remember that, guys? Yep. There was a deafening silence when he took the field of play. So sad. It was sad that he done it, and I'm the same as Stevie. Forget about it, but could you ever forgive him for doing that? The answer's no.
I was speaking to Brian McClare because obviously history will tell us just how prolific Brian McClare was for 4 seasons on a bounce, scored more goals, top goal scorer. But the fans' favourite always seemed to be Maurice Johnston, and McClare says, well, I'll tell you one thing about Maurice Johnston, he never took a bath after a game.
Right.
And I'm thinking, what a strange thing to remember, but that's Brian McClare all over the back. He never took a bath after the game. And when he went to Kiev, when we were drawn against Dynamo Kiev, he took a suitcase full of Mars bars, Maurice Johnston, because he was told to watch what he ate over there, so he didn't want to eat any of the cooked meals, so he just lived on Mars bars. I think he was a bit thick.
That's Springboard boys for you.
Wait, see, when he signed, obviously there's been a cash incentive to sign. You wouldn't do it otherwise. What else came into that? Ego?
I don't know. You seen his. Well, I don't know if he had a book or something at the time, or he's too young to have a book. But I remember.
No, you're right. He did have a book.
He was quoted as saying,
"You said that
you need to buy me a castle
Aye.
and give me £1 million." Now at that time, £1 million was money that was just unheard of for football. So I think what he said was that they actually came in and they offered. And to be fair, I think it reflects a wee bit on Celtic at the time, the board of directors at the time, who maybe should have, and certainly should have pushed the boat out. But as you keep saying, it's unforgivable what he done. But the reason we got to him, when you asked me about my football heroes, remember in 1986 when I'm a 16-year-old staying in the Garngad, and this guy played for our school and then went on and done what he done. So he was my hero. So I was absolutely devastated when that happened 3 years later.
Oh, definitely. Now, a state of mind and a Celtic state of mind goes out on a worldwide kind of level. We've got an audience all over the world. So for anyone who doesn't know the Garngad, tell us a wee bit about the place.
Garngad, somebody asked me one time, I think it was local housing association manager, he asked me what's the boundaries of the Garngad? And they'll, oh, it's still live, isn't it? And I said, that's the boundaries of the Garngad. It's in people's hearts. The people who are worldwide, and only through our recent association with St Roch and through social media, people who have got an association with Garngad are proud. Obviously, I'm not the best history person, but an area where there was disparate Irish Catholics came here and settled within the Garngad, and through that, families and generations of through Irish Catholics. So it's identified as an Irish Catholic area. However, I like more the stories of the Garngad people. The old wash house that used to be there. I used to have when I used to go to my granny's on a Saturday night. Her sister used to come up and tell all the stories about how in abject poverty people can, through different circumstances, and always had a smile on their face and always had a story to tell. And there's many poems and songs about Garngad's history, and there's more bright people than me could tell that story better. But it's known as the good and the bad, and my ma tells me some stuff about that. You can actually sometimes identify somebody for the Garngad before they tell you because of the way we speak. So we for example, will say Toonhead or Townhead. So there's certain things like that all the older ones will tell, and it's just that's the sort of thing for me. Being a Garngad person is a big thing, and it's a place we should be proud of. And there's certain things happened over the years that the communities came together, and for me that's the most important part of the area. Is that there's still poverty and there's still a lot of difficulties in terms of drug problems that some young people are facing, and there's maybe certain levels of crime and unemployment. However, any single time that we have found a need for the community to come together, you won't find a better place in the world.
Well, again, this goes back, Stevie, to a lot of the work he's been doing at St Roch. And I go back to something that Jim told me when he was growing up. It was always an ambition, if you were into playing football, which most young laddies were, to play for the Rock. And we even spoke to Frank McGrory, and it was his ambition to play for St Roch. What is it about St Roch that attracts that ilk?
I think it's location and its affiliation going all the way back to James McGrory going to Celtic. The Irish diaspora who are there, St Roch's parish was founded as an overspill of St Mungo's. Used to be 8,000 people would go to Mass in St Mungo's over a weekend, so they had to build a parish. So it's abject poverty, and out of poverty becomes a sphinx. They know that you've got something to hold on to. When Father Lawton founded St Roch's, that was the Garngad's answer to Celtic. Mm-hmm. So all the people growing up just go towards it, they gravitate towards it. And again, Andy's been a wee bit, no harsh on himself, but Andy's sort of started the rebirth of St Roch's when he took over the manager. He's got a great sense of community. One of the things that he speaks there about, they'll come together in adverse times. Andy and Albert Falls were real driving forces when Mark Cummins was murdered, to have the Mark Cummins Memorial, which they ran for 10 years, which must have brought in over £35,000, which was given to local charities every year, and that was just for the local community. But we've managed to take the things, take them to St Roch. Well, now St Roch is taking that mantle, and our aim is to help anybody in trouble if it doesn't cost us or it's not against the law.
Mm-hmm. Jim, what attracted you as a young kid growing up to St Roch and to what became James McGrory Park?
It was just the magic. I think it was the wall round about it, and sometimes going up and actually going into the bath up there. Some people may remember those stories, and knowing that Celtic were always going to be there. And get up, and as we were young, there's a lane that comes up from Black Hill, just about 30 yards up and across the other side at the gas yard, the gasworks wall there, and you go down, and we would go up, jump over, get a couple of games in it, and some of it was grass, some of it wasn't grass. It was just it was a magical feeling. Mm-hmm. Paul, we guys just getting up and getting a game of football, hoping that nobody finds us, and thinking that we were Celtic, not necessarily St Roch, but thinking we were Celtic playing in there in this enclosed, and it was a magnificent stadium. It was just the thoughts and the wild dreams are going, right, we're playing here, we're at Celtic Park. Andy said about a wee poem about the Garngad. That there's one that I've seen here, a couple of wee lines, which I think is fantastic. Hopefully, we can put this across the right way. There was great excitement, filled with pleasure and joy. Songs were sung in harmony of the Garngad's Irish boy. Children ran through the street, relating the news, expanding the story, how Celtic won again at Parkhead. From goal after goal from the great James McGrory. A football pitch would be outlined in a cobblestone street where the sons of Irish immigrants played with the poorest of shoes on their feet. They played until darkness fell or when the rain tore at their souls, but they told their mothers, told their fathers how they scored a James McGrory goal.
Fantastic. Brilliant.
Ideal.
Great words. Brilliant words.
I wrote that.
You know that one?
No, I said I wrote it, I was only joking.
No, it was a guy called Daniel McDonagh, 2008.
Brilliant.
If he's listening, brilliant.
Outstanding bit of poetry there. Superb. Or a song. You said you wrote it. You're quite artistic, obviously, and you're into the arts because you've done a bit of acting yourself, and
I have indeed, yes.
you've got more kind of camera time than any of us sitting in this room.
Aye.
So tell us about your acting career, your flirtation with acting.
It goes back, I'm now part of a drama group as such, and we put productions on, but it goes back to, it was in my house in my 23rd birthday, and an advert came on to be an extra, and I was in the Oasis video, right? So she talks about all these different extras and stuff, and I'm thinking, God, yeah, I got a chance to go in. So phones up this agent woman, right? So she signs you up, and you end up going on all the usuals like the Tigers of this world, and I was on more Tigers than anybody, and all of that stuff, and Tyrod, and for that, I eventually started doing like adverts. So that you go to the story is right. When I done the extra stuff, right, and I was doing this job, and these two women said to me, "You ever thought about modelling?" And I'm going, "How about you go and chase yourself?" And in my mind, in a very unconstructed young man, my terminology and I'll quote what my mindset was saying, "You're a poof if you're a model." Right, in my mind at that time, that's not the kind of thing a Garngad boy done. But eventually I went another job and they said to me, "Go along." So I signed up to this modelling agency, right, and got some decent jobs. Interestingly, one of the jobs I got was for the Evening Times. There's two guys coming along, and the photographers, they don't care about anything. There's one Rangers tap, one Celtic tap. And we go in and they say to me, I think he said something ridiculous, like, "For your eyes or something, you go with the blue." The guy didn't have a clue. And just as well, the big guy I was with, he bailed me out and says, "Not up," because they knew how much I Celtic man I was. But all that, so I ended up starting to do adverts. But there was an opportunity to come along to do some actual acting theatre. There was a guy who put together a production company, he put a production of the Benny Lynch life story. So I played a part in that, and we were meant to tour. But we done one show out at Bells Hill, and it crumbled, and I never get an opportunity to do it again until I hooked up with these people. My cousin, who was in a sort of a recovery for issues that he had, he was in this group called Sweets for Addicts, and the Sweets for Addicts, they actually rehearse at St Roch as well. It's another one of the community activities we're part of, but the whole cast are either affected by recovery of drugs or alcohol or gambling, or they've got a family member who's associated with it. So I'm going to link to the shows, and I said, "Look, I've done a wee bit, I'd like it." So they gave me a go, and then the first one I've done, Juno and the Paycock, the play was called, and then recently I've done a musical where I had to sing on stage, called Addicted, and it's about people's recovery. We're running that again next year, but the most prominent one I probably had was a Phil McGilligan play. It was called Rebellion. And it was, the premise was that you could bring down the governments, but different ways. So it was set in, there was a computer hacker in this generation his dad was a Mad Rangers man, and it was set at the time of the Craig White stuff. So Rangers are the sharp. So the play incorporates all that. But my biggest part in that was I was Captain Paddy Buck, who was part of the original sort of Irish Republican movement. But the setting was in a place called Frongoff in Wales, where turns out that people within the 1960 rebellion and stuff, they looked all the Republican people in the same place in Wales who never went to war and stuff like that, and it turned out there was a breeding ground for republicanism, so they were able to make plans and stuff for the Civil War when they went back to Ireland. So it was really interesting. A long answer to him, but I'm involved in some stuff.
The great part about that as well is that St Roch's are able to support that on a community level. How important is it for people again, from working class or underprivileged backgrounds can get involved in the arts?
I mean, the very limited amount of time that I've done it, I can understand how, certainly for people who need to aspire to something or have a sense of achievement, or particularly those who are in recovery for whatever demons that they're suffering, then that is a way to express themselves, that you can be a character that's not you, but you can certainly use it as an opportunity to get some sort of self-gratification, but also get pride for people within your family sector and show that you're taking the next step. So Stevie mentioned earlier, when we first went up to St Roch, we actually changed the constitution, and the line actually reads that if any local individual organisation asks us for help and it doesn't impact us on us financially or reputationally, we need to say yes. So all of this stuff in terms of the Squeaks for Addicts, when they're asking for rehearsal rooms, then we understand the impact that's having. And there's so many other groups that are in the same sort of boat that hopefully we've opened the doors to them to allow them to benefit the wider community.
It's brilliant. I mean, Jim, see when you look back, working class background like yourself, it's sometimes kind of like sneered upon if you were into acting or you know, some kind of drama or even art. You know, it was something that you look back on and people looked on it with suspicion almost, Stevie.
Aye.
It's great that you're able to embrace that at the Rock.
It is great that they embraced it. Even if you go back to the interview you done with Stephen, and regarding his days as a younger man as well, going up to places like Shuffles, going to the dancing. If you dressed a wee bit differently back then, there might have been some slants thrown at you that you may have been a gay or whatever, or there was something wrong with you, you looked out of sort. Of course there was, but being able to, what the guys have done at St Roch's and open up, I think that's a wonderful thing that they've done. But hopefully people nowadays have got an open mind on everything, and everybody can be what they want to be, and they can dress the way they want to dress, they can support whoever they want to support, and they can sing their songs and read their poetry, go into acting or fashion, and be looked at as going, well done for getting into that avenue of work, or that avenue of sport or song, whatever. I think it's great.
It is. I mean, you've mentioned that you got into management at St Roch's. Talk to us about some of your achievements since you got involved.
Football, I never played at any level with any of the guys that you interviewed before. I played amateur football. My highlight was starting and being involved with a team block here in Star, where I played for them for 5 years. And I always, my mindset was always that, and this is, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but my mindset was always, I could maybe do better than the thing that's happening just now. So eventually I became the manager of Block here in Star. It was all my mates, 5 years doing that. Stepped aside and then took on a sort of reserve team for the next 3 years, who were very successful. But at that point, after 8 years of being a football manager locally, I think St Roch's at that particular time had sort of I don't want to be disparaging about anybody, but they hadn't had the opportunity to use the types of technology for marketing and all that stuff that we have. So therefore, basically there's crowds of maybe 20 people. But as I said, the club worldwide was within people's hearts. So I went up for an interview for the manager of St Roch's, and they offered me the job around about March, but I had to see out the season with my amateur team. So thankfully I was able to do that, and then came on board around about, I think it was season 2015-16. So I was the manager at St Roch's, which is a thing that you live day to day, but you never actually get a chance to reflect on things that you've done and work out whether or not what sort of impact you had. So in a dressing room, I always talk to players about, it's not really important about the money you get or the status you get. If you score a goal, the first thing that you think about is, did my ma see that, or did my brother see that, who's in the stadium now? Don't tell me lies. And I think that you go to any level of football, professional level, if a professional football player does something decent and his parents are in the crowd, the first thing he thinks about is, I've made them proud of me. So for me, I'd always say to the players, look, it's not probably the important thing is that when you're sitting in the pub when you're 70, you've got a story to tell about you being a football player. So for me, I think hopefully I've created a story, or I'm on the road to creating a story that I can tell when I'm 70. That I can look back in pride and people can check it. So 5 years at St Roch's, I went in, we were second bottom of the bottom division in junior football. The fan base was very low, aspirations were very low. Interestingly, at that point, we were sort of getting the crumbs for the table at the SFA. they looked on as they were used to give their hand-me-downs and their old bibs and their old balls, and it was acceptable and that, Scotland taps and all that. And at that point, St Roch was looked upon as the team that you didn't like because we were bottom. But so for me, in terms of football success, I was lucky enough that we were able to get promoted in the first season. Well, it was brought its own demands because at that point, St Roch hadn't been promoted and stayed up since 1979.
Right.
So there was a big challenge there. So the following season was all about making sure we stayed up. So we finished 5th in the league the following season. And then we thought, right, that's us, we've maintained ourselves at this level. We push on now and try and get into the Championship, which was the Super Leagues at the time. And I don't think the club had ever been in the Super League. Steve, you can tell me if I'm going wrong in this stuff. The club hadn't been in the Super League at that point. So the following season, our target was to certainly finish above 5th. So we finished 3rd that season, which was a big disappointment for everybody. But we were still progressing. We'd got promoted, we'd finished 5th, stayed up. We'd finished 3rd, which is the last 2 games of the win, we'd won the league, and we bottled it. But we learned from it, and I think the biggest achievement I could say that I got for St Roch is that following season. If you've had that disappointment and you've built up the momentum and you need to change the playing staff because it becomes a wee bit rusty, the following season we got promoted, finished 2nd and got promoted to the Super Leagues. On my 5th season we were in the Super League, and we decided at that point we'll consolidate for the season to ensure that we can have a wee bit of basically we felt that getting maybe promoted to the Premier League and then competing, no, get relegated in the centenary year, it might have been better consolidating and then moving on. And for me, Stevie and I have spoken about this, consolidating for me as a football manager didn't really work because with that bit of momentum. However, for the club, it was the best thing to do. My best achievement probably are the night that sort of encapsulates for me everything. This is a story I'll tell when I'm 70. So we're playing against. It turns out that this particular game, we won the game right, but it put us 3 points ahead in the league. 2 points ahead in the league, and the team that was up against us, Rossfield, had to play on Friday night. Turns out, Rossfield, Port Glasgow they're playing against, they missed a penalty the last kick of the ball. Us and Roch would have been the champions, and that for me would have been a brilliant achievement. Right, that's something you can never look back on. He still slags me. He's won 2 leagues and I've won none. However, that night, this sort of just rounds up about everything they were trying to do at St Roch, right? I came out and I know that we need to beat Wishaw in this particular time. Wishaw are semi-finalists in the Scottish Cup, so they're having a good season here, and a good side, the top side actually. So I'm going up to the, and I always walked up, any time I was a manager, first time I walked up to the park just to get that wee bit of clear in my head. Coming out of the house, 2 kids, Mrs. Morning, she's morning at the time. Walking up to the park, so somebody's driving down it and they burly in, right? Where you going? And I look in, it's Berry Old, right? So I'm going, where you going? You've drove by it. Oh no, I can never find that gate. Jump in. So Berry's having a conversation with me on the way up to the park and he's talking about my players, right? And he's basically, because he'd come up several times, he does team talks, absolutely brilliant and best. Anytime he comes up, we get him a 3-0 up before 15 minutes. So Berry all picks me up on this particular night, takes me up to the stadium and drops me off. All the best, son. I'm buzzing. Comes into the changing room, does his talk. Brilliant. We go out and there's 800 people in the stadium. There's kids. This is one of my biggest things. There's 100 kids on the park playing, kicking a ball before we even go on the pitch. I'm talking about children. So we're going to play the game, and we eventually win the game 2-1. There's people there for all the different community projects we've involved in. Everybody's buzzing, they're all celebrating at the end. And it's hard to say, that's funny, I'm getting emotional. The thing for me was I'm walking off the pitch and everybody's buzzing. Sorry, dealt with it. It's terrible.
Sorry, people get emotional when they come on shows, so you're not the first.
My mum comes up and gives me a cuddle and says, I'm proud of you, son. And that was it. Take care.
No, it was an absolutely great night. It's actually my finest night. I've been lucky enough to win a title with St Roch as a player,
right.
But that was my finest night as anything to do with St Roch. It was absolutely magnificent. Our sponsors, our guests. Andy doubted how it was going to go. I had no doubts that he would lead the team to success. He had them playing great football, some great people. And sometimes he's a wee bit too hard on himself. You know, it's a bit of bluster with Andy. Sometimes he's not as outspoken as maybe his temperament would lead him to be, but he should be very proud of what he's done for St Roch.
Good on you.
See on the Bertie Hall side, Bertie, I know, he's a patron of Jimmy Johnston, and he's very close to my heart, very special, and quite quite close with him as well. Quite close with him as well. And I remember him saying, Simmy, one, I'll need to go up to St Roch's. I come up to St Roch's and I says, aye, okay. He said, no, you've got to remember, St Roch's is special. St Roch's is special. He says, do you know why it's special? I says, well, on you go, Bert, to tell me. He says, the boss. That's the boss's club. That's right. And it's the way he said it. And when he says things, he becomes very passionate, and he becomes a very, very emotional. Then he says, that's the boss's club. That's the boss's club. We've got to help the club, because the Lisbon Lions, the majority of the Lisbon Lions came from there. Where it was 9-10 or whatever it was, he said to me. He said, they've came from there. So St Roch's is special in the Lisbon Lions' heart, and other Lisbon Lions' hearts as well, and the great James McGrory.
One of the best lines I've ever heard him, and we don't say it enough. I'm going to quote him, right, so he swears, is that alright? I'll quote him. So he comes in the changing room and he'd done all the things. Some of you have heard the stuff about entertaining and all that. He'd done that with our boys, and he's absolutely, I mean, he's an icon. I mean, some of the young boys are coming in. So it's, by the way, no St Roch players are Celtic fans. They
same as Jimmy Johnston,
support whatever team they want. It doesn't matter to us at all. But even the boys who are affiliated to Rangers, they can see the pride they've got listening to this man speak. But one of the best lines, I don't even know if it's a throwaway line that he never repeated, but he's in the dressing room. And he's talking about Mr McGrory and how proud he was to be that this is his club, and he says, Mr McGrory loved the Celtic, but he fucking loved the Rock. And I went, for God's sake, you know. So that in terms of my management career, that's the stories I'll tell when I'm older. But I've been lucky enough that I stayed on as a secretary after Stevie knows it got to the point after the 5 years where it's funny because expectations rise. Fans are looking for certain things, and they're quite rightly so. And for me, it just became too much. You're doing things on a voluntary basis. You're trying to help out, and then as you get to that level, you start to get scrutinised quite rightly, because you're at the point then where you're on a budget and you're bringing in players and you're buying players and paying players wages. So therefore, there's a bit of responsibility. So I found it difficult, and I stepped aside at the right time just for my own health. But I was lucky enough I stayed on as secretary to help out running the club in some projects and stuff like that. And the opportunities came up this season that we're going to have a sort of reserve team, an under-20s. So I'll be on a Friday night. And when I seen that opportunity, there was a couple of junior clubs that contacted me about going along and maybe being their manager. But playing against the Rock would be a bit mad, I think. So the opportunity came up to be the under-20s manager, and now I've got a new project. So it takes me back to Buckhill Star, being the manager for 5 years and then starting the wee team. So my plan for the development team is, well, the first year will be assessment, second year will be improvement, third year will be success. You've got that recorded.
It sounds like a good plan. I mean, see the James McGrory tales that you're telling us here. They're so important, and it's important for Celtic fans to realise the connection between St Roch's and the club. And before we came on, Andy, you were talking about sliding doors moments. Please share this incredible timeline with us.
There's many I'm missing, and again, there'll be many others in this. And if people have watched Sliding Doors, right, the whole premise of this is that decisions that you make in your life are going to impact on future. There could be people that you learn certain things from that influence your behaviour in later life. So it's really about every moment in life is precious, and you take on what you can take on. And that step that you take is either for the benefit or the worst, but ultimately it's all about learning. So when you talk about St Roch's and Celtic, I think, I'll go back to my biggest achievement at St Roch's. I made a decision very, very early on that we were going to re-identify as being Celtic-oriented club and an Irish Catholic club, and they get us back onto what our roots were. So again, that was. But when I was talking about the link with Celtic, and people go, why would you want to get involved with Celtic? And why, it's St Roch's, Celtic's not to do with it. And this whole thing about that sliding doors concept. If you buy into that, right, and you believe that choices you make or influences you have an impact on your life and the decisions you make, then Jimmy McGrory obviously signs for Celtic in 1922 after scoring the Scottish Cup winning goal for St Roch's. Now you need to ask, if St Roch's are near that platform for Jimmy McGrory at that particular time, does he sign for Celtic? Arguably he could have, but he might not have. So then you go, Jimmy McGrory's influences when he's at St Roch's, does that impact on his Celtic career? And I'm going to give some examples of the big, in my lifetime, and before, the big Celtic moments, right? You look at 1957, the 7-1 game, Jimmy McGrory's the manager. He then goes on to sign, Jim, we said 9 at the Lisbon Lions.
9, possibly 10. I'm thinking in my head.
So again, McGrory doesn't go to Celtic. We don't sign those 9 players. Mr. Stein doesn't come in with the impact he does. So there's a Rock connection with 1967. We go to our next big game, 1970. Jim Brogan signed for St Roch signed for Celtic from St Roch and plays in the game. You then come into the games that I can remember, and you look at 1986 Love Street and 88. Paul McStay's dad, John McStay, played for St Roch. Now, if they were talking about sliding doors moments, John McStay may well have learned some stuff up at St Roch when he's playing that he passed on to his boy. It could have happened. I'm not saying it did, but it could have happened. Then you go in 1998. The next big thing for me was we win the league. I don't like talking about stopping the 10. We make it 1, and Simon Donnelly's playing, and Simon Donnelly's dad Tam played for St Roch. I don't know if he played well.
No.
Simon Donnelly's dad Tam Donnelly plays for St Roch. Does Tam Donnelly tell his boy when he's a wee boy that he's learned certain things and he does the overlap and run? I don't know, he might have learned it at St Roch. And we go on and you go, well, does the history end there? And then the very next big thing for Celtic, I don't have a connection at the moment for Martin O'Neill's team. However, you look at the Invincible season and you go, is there a link there? And you go, well, John McStay, Paul McStay's father, was a scout for St Roch and he signed Kieran Tierney. So all of this stuff, you go, why would you want to make the Rock associated with Celtic? Because intrinsically it is. We are. There's teams out there, and I wouldn't hammer them. There's teams like Johnston who make a connection with St Mirren, and Thornley would make a connection with Albion Rovers. But I think because we choose to make our connection with the biggest club in Scotland, the best club in Scotland, the club that happens to be on our doorstep, the closest, and with all the history we've got, we get a wee bit vilified for it. I'll take you quickly back to the first time I was pulled up with the SFA. And the time we'd won the league.
You say the first time as if there's been numerous.
There was many. We fought them in many fronts. Stevie will tell you, but we usually win. To be fair, it's quite a bit of sport, wasn't it, at a particular time? But this occasion, that's what I was saying earlier on in the thing with the bulletin about the SFA and the dinosaurs and how I've had to experience it, but I didn't want to say that in the bulletin. But anyway, first time we won the league, right, and the league secretary, what name? He's at the game. So we get promoted. My first season in junior football. We had to get a result going my way. So it works out really well. Everybody's celebrating. Doesn't he come up and congratulate us, right? So I get a letter through the post saying they want to speak to us about an Irish tricolour flying at the game. Bearing in mind that St Roch fans have got an anti-fascist flag, an the Pride flag. They've got a St Pauli flag,
Palestinian flag,
a saltire, and an Irish tricolour. So I go up myself, and I'm sitting there and I'm going, he's going, aye. So I said, you never congratulate us for winning the league, but I'm quite interested to see why you would pull us up about that particular flag. So that this particular individual he's got hold of all the other members of the committee, and they're just, some of them might have their own thoughts, but they're in agreement. So I say, listen, what is it you want me to do here? And they go, the flag's banned, you can't fly. And I says, I'm not accepting that. I says, flag your nation, you can't say that. I said, if you want me to go down that road, I'm just naive and I'm in arguing with these guys, right? But probably everybody else goes, right, what we'll do is I'm arguing to the hilt. And I say, I'll tell you what I'll do. I says, I was at Cambuslang Rangers that last season, and they're flying a Union flag on the flagpole. I tell you what I'll do, I'll fly a Irish flag on the flagpole because, well, you want to do that for? And I say, well, we were formed by a parish priest. We're called St Roch. We play in the Garngad in a stadium that's called James McGrory Park. And we wear green. I said, you did the maths. And they weren't happy. But eventually there was other things they pulled us up about certain things, and we tend to, actually we went up and there was people who of prominence who came along and represented us, and we won the cases. But we were right. But I think in the past, SFA at all different levels may well have just kiboshed stuff in the past. We might have got told, you're not flying Irish flags.
No, but fair play to you for fighting the authorities on that subject, because that's a subject close to the hearts of all Celtic supporters. Well, it's something that we've been fighting for generations, Stevie.
We do have a great story, and it's a gentleman that's not too well now, Peter Flynn, so best wishes to Peter and hope he gets his recovery. Yep. But when Peter was the secretary, Sir Bob Kelly says to Peter, as long as there's a Celtic, there'll be a St Roch.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
So we definitely have that connection, and we won't be denying it. Some of the abuse and I believe the victimisation that we've had from the SJFA, which is going away as we get into the West of Scotland League, has just been premeditated and determined to close St Roch. But through ourselves and some prominent businessmen and solicitors and supporters liaison officer helping us. We've defeated them every time we've went up to challenge them.
You'll know, to a paraphrase, right? There was a particular time, there was a wee occurrence, like a winning Rangers game, Scottish Cup. One of our players was getting racially abused, so he was called Black B, right? So we ended up getting up, and this particular individual for the SFA heard somebody saying Orange B. But the whole thing started because of and we end up saying, sorry, on go. We end up saying to him, he's selective in his hearing. But Stevie will tell you a better story than this. But we've got to go up and we've got to appeal in front of a sheriff. This doesn't happen at junior level football. We went up, we appealed, we lost the appeal, and we said we'll take it further, we're going to a judicial hearing. So we need to go to Hampden in front of a sheriff to hold our case, basically. And Stevie, I'm paraphrasing, but Stevie knows this lawyer who's a prominent lawyer, I don't know what's his name, but he calls to Stevie and says, "Yeah, I'm hearing your story, I've only got 2 minutes in it, but I'm hearing your story. And what I'm hearing is that they're treating you differently because but is that correct? And Stevie, am I right in saying that you're getting treated less because they see you as Fenian bees?" And Stevie went, "Well, sort of." And he says, "That's why I'm going to represent you for free." Outstanding. We were up there with one of the best lawyers in football, and we beat us. So they're going, as I say, that whole crumbs for the table thing. When we went to the appeal, they're saying to me, "Right, you just lodge this complaint, and what you'll do is you give a bit of paperwork, and we'll log it, and it's really good at it, oh, brilliant, and who's coming up?" And we just held our powder, and I'm saying myself, Stevie Mullen's coming up, and then just a week before it, I say his name, can I?
Yeah.
I says, myself, Stevie Mullen, and Liam O'Donnell will be represented. And they went, what do you mean? So we went up and right away we won the case. So over the years there's been opportunity to make a number of things. So there you go.
Brilliant. Andy, now Jim has been racking his brains.
Yep.
We're talking about the signings of James McGrory.
Yep.
When you look at the squad in Lisbon, before you read them out, Jim, I would just like to say that one of those signings, John Fallon, turns 80 tomorrow. So a massive happy birthday.
Happy birthday
to Big John, the original holy goalie.
Yep.
And Jim Simonette will read out the Hall of Famers that James McGrory signed.
This is me. I've not checked any Wikipedia or anything, guys, but I think it's 13 players
Really?
that James McGrory signed, and the historians that are listening will correct us, obviously, but I think it's McNeil, Gemmell, Craig, Auld, Lennox, Johnson, Chalmers, Clark, O'Neill, who became a St Roch's manager, Fallon, Hughes, Gallagher, and Bobby Murdoch.
One more.
Who?
Jock Steen.
Correct, Jock Steen. So he'd have signed Jock Steen as well.
Brilliant.
So there you go. And did he sign maybe your pal?
He signed Josh Conley, he signed David Hay, and they played in the 1970 final.
On terms of Neely?
Nearly Mockin signed for James McGrory.
Really?
Neely Morton.
Yeah.
So that's us up to 12, 13. So that's us up to 15.
Yep. So anybody's
And Sean Fallon.
Aye.
Yeah.
Would you sign Sean Fallon?
Yeah, he signed Sean.
I'm not sure.
He signed
So
Sean.
let's say he did Sean Fallon as well. 16.
So that
Wow.
takes me on to something. This is a personal project for mine. It's obviously to do with the club. But when I said to you before, my grandfather, his hero was Jim McGrory, and a personal project that I've mentioned before, but I'm determined I'm going to go ahead with it. If Celtic haven't done anything for 1922, which will be 100 years from our Scottish Cup final, I will be starting a campaign to get a statue of Jimmy McGrory in the Garngad.
Absolutely incredible. I think that's tremendous.
I think that's absolutely brilliant, and that once you put your mind to it and that goes out across the world, that is achievable. And just like the guys at the moment in Newry,
Yep.
in Ireland,
Yep.
are looking to get one there for Willie Mealy. I think it's fantastic.
Brilliant.
So well done, and I hope that goes well. So it's ironic as well that Jimmy Johnston's Academy and Charitable Trust, which is based in Glasgow, to anyone out there that may not know, ironically in Ward 7 of Glasgow. That's quite ironic. And who are going to be and privileged to come up with play with a select team against St Roch select team for your 100th year. So there's a Lisbon Lions name coming up there, and I think that will be fantastic as well.
Yep.
And that will bring in the crowds as well, Stephen, eh?
I don't think we will be big enough to have the amount of people who would want to come to that game. We were speaking on the way through, myself and Andy, and we're absolutely gobsmacked. The only thing that was made me more gobsmacked was Andy wants to try and put on boots for this. So the diet thing is nothing to do with losing weight.
But Paul's in training just now.
I've been in training for 2 months.
You played?
2 months. I'll probably not get a game, but I'll be ready. Andy. But who we do definitely have confirmed for the game is Saul Davis, who is the lead guitarist of James. So, and he's promised to try and get some of his other celebrity stroke rock and roll stars to come along. So who knows what might happen at halftime with a few acoustic guitars, Andy. But all that's left for me to say, I think it's been a fascinating walk down memory lane. St Roch's are a special club, and when you look at the effect that James McGrory's had on Celtic, for you to come up with this idea, and I would dearly hope that Celtic do something. If they don't, we'll be right behind you to raise the necessary funds for that statue. I think to have that in the Garngad is just a shining beacon of achievement, success, something to look up to.
You asked me at the very start of the programme, what's the Garngad? And I spoke to you about the over the generations of poverty and shining stars and resilience and community. And you talk about the link with St Roch's and Celtic, but certainly Garngad, if you look at Jimmy McGrory as being a catalyst for the club to go forward and achieve what they did. Next to him in that statue could be Stevie Chalmers, who's a Garngad boy and scored the most important club. So if you're asking me, is the Garngad important? I'll back up with the whole sliding doors. Garngad's the most important place in Celtic history. There you go.
Well, I'm not going to argue with that. And tell us, because obviously we can't finish this discussion without you telling us about the Garngad Street Party.
All right, okay, aye.
You almost forgot there, didn't you?
Of course, aye. I could. You probably realise now I can talk. I could talk about the street party for an hour and a half, and I wouldn't cover all this stuff. So I'll try and be brief. We in 1998, there was a response to winning the league. The reaction. So we got the Garngad and we have a sort of a unofficial street party where we all team onto the road. The traffic stops. But I've got to say that the police were great to come along and just let us go on with it. So that probably planted the seed. So 2001, Martin O'Neill's first season. Very early we know we're winning the league. So somebody come up with the idea, let's have a street party, but let's have it organised this time. So bear in mind, this is only about a month before we actually have the street party. So there's no social media, there's no massive media for appeals, there's no. So basically it showed, and this in itself showed the Garngad for what it is, right? So a couple of people come up with the idea. So we had to have meetings and stuff, so we came on board. We created probably in the space of the first week, you had a group of people who were responsible for flags and bunting and making flags. A group of people who were responsible for painting. So on Royston Road there was one of the shops along Royston Road, people you don't know what I'm talking about. On Bobby's Wall, there's Celtic greats. On the Lawyer's Wall, there's a Celtic Irish famine. And the cops are stopped when the guys are painting, and the two shopkeepers come out and say, that's my land, they're using it if they want. So we get together, we have to create all these different parts. So from a committee originally maybe 10 or 12 people, they end up over 100 people contributing towards the street party before even that kicks off. But we got lucky because we have to plan a date, right? And at that time we go 7th of April, we can win it if we win these next 3 or 4 games. But we played Dundee, you may know better than me, we played Dundee on the Wednesday night, right? And it was about 80 minutes gone, and I think it's 1 each. And if we don't score, we can't win the league on a Saturday. Mielby scores, we have about 10 minutes. So it all comes together for the street party. As I say, no social media. There's somebody responsible for the bands. So it all comes together really well. And 7,000 people present on the Garngad Road. And my role is, because, as you probably realise, I like the sound of my own voice, I was put in front of the camera for Celtic View and Celtic TV, and I was on the stage doing the announcements, not getting drunk as the day goes on. But it's remembered by Celtic fans. I mean, it's on YouTube and anybody who's not seen it, go and look at Garngad Street Party. But that came about, again, it shows you resilience and responding to need. So the whole community, this might not sound a lot to people, right? In the lead up to the street party, we're going on Chatham Doors, right? See the high-rise stories in Charles Street there?
Yeah.
Do you know the fight?
I know, yeah.
We're Chatham Doors to people who we've never met before, never spoke to before. And we're handing them bunting to put out their window so we travel all the way down to Royston Road. Somebody made an Irish cycle that said Garden of God. This, actually, the Irish Times Post came up afterwards and said, is this the biggest cycle that's ever been made? It filled a full tenement. So if anybody's listening to it, it's been lost. If anybody's got it now, let us know. But so all these people are contributed towards putting our stuff together. We had bands to come up. So the reason I'm telling this story is that afterwards, there's something happens, right? That we go, oh no, because we were conscious, people were contributing. So any money that was left towards the street party, we bought another sweets for the Wains and bouncy castles and all that sort of stuff. So the day goes brilliantly, right? That night, the Cycle Council went against the stage. That fell down. So at the very last minute, this big Rangers fan contacted me and says, I've got one of the big curtain back trailers. Use that as the stage. Just get it back to us on Sunday. So I go, yeah, well, that's fine. Brilliant. Thanks very much for that. So he gives us this curtain back trailer. We would park on Charles Street that night, go back the next morning to see it's there. And in the back, somebody left their jacket and the Waynes had set the jacket on fire. So the curtain back, I don't know if he's a part of it. They must be fireproof because only a wee bit it's burnt, right? But if you shut it over, it's gubbed. So I phone the guy and I go, listen, this situation. So he's come up, picked it up, and he's raging, obviously. So he phones me in the Monday morning. He says, the damage for the thing alone's £800. He says, but for every day I'm off the road, it's £300. So I'm going, I'm not going, that's me got it, I'm going to go get a bank loan for this. So I met one of the guys who was myself and the two other guys, Jerry and Joe. We decided we'll make a video. What we'll do is make a video over the course of the week. If we can sell the video, it means we'll get some income. We can pay towards it and need to set a bank loan. Again, before social media, we put signs up in the local shops. So we then have to invest. We have to go up to Costco and buy this video recorder, this VHS, that you can record and edit on it. I'm not joking, you've been involved in media. So we then, for the Monday at lunchtime, we start getting videos in and we change as we go. We spend 4 days constant, I'm talking about 20 hours a day, constantly making this video. Where there's a bit on the video where Celtic lift the trophy and there's confetti goes, but we need the confetti to go for 3 seconds, but only goes for half a second. It takes us 5 hours to edit this. Do you know, that's how complicated it was. But eventually, right, I'm rambling here. Eventually we get this product on the Friday. So we get a company called Cameron Williams, who are based in Thornley Wood, Thornbank, and they the video stuff. So they say, what's on the video? We tell them, they look and they go, I'll be able to do this, we use this. There's a bit for Sky Sports. So we're going, let me, we're not going to do 100 videos, it's not good. So they run the street party video. And as you can imagine, but people word gets out, the street party video's happening, and by the time we get back up to Garngad, there's people queuing at Joe Chambers' door for it. So eventually it turns out that we end up going back here to Cameron Williams. But the guy gets paid after, Taylor gets paid after the Sunday because we know we're going to get the income in. Taylor gets paid after the Sunday. The street party video becomes massive. We go to back here to Cameron Williams and he tells us he's doing a Jim Baxter video at the same time, and ours is out publishing within that week. But the story goes on. I mean, there was Celtic players come up to the street party. It was well renowned. But the thing that I just learned this morning was that Joe Chambers, who helped us do the video along with Jerry, he had took the video doing every single player within Martin O'Neill's squad, including the management team. I've all got a copy of that video. I was good to them all.
Super.
So it's a nice story. And again, when I'm 70 and I'm telling a story in a pub, it's good to see that I'm part of the street party committee. There was so many people involved, but that's why I never mentioned any individually in case I missed any. But there was hundreds of people in the community, and it showed again the Garngad coming together for the better spirits.
I was actually at it with my wife and my 3 kids, and it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. What a day!
It was incredible.
And, never got a video, but it was a great day. It was just so busy, and the bunting and the flags and everything. They were kids. My 3 kids were young at the time, so it was brilliant. Well done for that.
Well, 2021 is the 20th anniversary, which could be the 10 in a row season. And there's social media now. So just watch this space.
Watch this space.
Street party Mark 2.
Brilliant. Now, what I'd like to say on behalf of Jim and I to the two of you, Stevie and Andy, thanks for coming along today. It's been really fascinating. And St Rochs are always welcome to this studio to talk about what you are doing. We love the club dearly, and hopefully going forward we can support you as much as possible. Thanks everybody for tuning in on Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. I'm sure you have enjoyed Stevie and Andy's input, and we're looking forward to raising some cash for the Jimmy McGrory statue campaign. Thanks very much for joining us on A State of Mind, guys.